So before I kind of, like share my screen and start the demonstration of PolicyMap, just to kind of provide, some quick introductions. So my name's Brian Blacker, and then I'm also joined by Darian Porter, also from PolicyMap, and the two of us are going to be, sort of the main points of contact on the subscription for kind of your team. And so Darian is one of our newer members of our team, so he's just kind of going to be observing for today, but we'll both kind of be points of contact moving forward. So I can provide like a quick background on PolicyMap just in case that may be helpful, and then we can jump right into the training if that sounds good to everybody. And Rochelle, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to kind of say at the top before or not, but
no, we're just really excited about learning about mapping, honestly.
cool.
Our partner organization, the Guild, is also doing work within the Sweet Auburn district. So understanding it from this perspective, it will be incredibly helpful for both of our organizations. So
Great.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So just to provide a little bit of background on PolicyMap. So we're a nationwide online mapping and data platform. So we're a small team. We're just about like 20 people based largely in Philadelphia, but we have a mapping tool that kind of has like data coverage across the country, and we have users and subscribers that work with the tool across the country. We combine almost 40,000 indicators from some data, public data sources, so things like the census, data from HUD and health data from CDC and other federal agencies, and then as well as some proprietary data that we license on things like like home sale activity, school performance, residential and business vacancy, and we kind of make these data sources available in an easy to use mapping and reporting tool. So you'll see that the data is going to cover a broad range of topics once we jump into the demonstration. So like demographics, income, housing, jobs, health, education, and other areas. The types of use cases of PolicyMap are for research, market studies, business planning, and site selection, lots of grant applications, impact analysis, and just sort of general data visualization. We work with some government agencies, federal, state, and local government agencies. Lots of universities use PolicyMap. Nonprofit organizations. We have a number actually in Atlanta that we do work with. Lots of community development financial institutions, and then also some recent customers and subscribers in sort of like healthcare and public health. So we started in 2008 as part of a larger organization called the Reinvestment Fund, which some of you may have heard of before. So they're a community development financial institution based in Philadelphia. So they originally started PolicyMap as like an internal tool to be able to make maps and access data quickly on the neighborhoods where they were making grants, and then to be able to start like understanding or talking about their impact. And then we kind of spun off from there because there was obviously other organizations that could use a similar tool. So that's kind of the background on PolicyMap. For historic districts, of the subscription, just to kind of cover like what's included with the subscription, it's 10 user seats, which I know you guys have kind of spread across a few of your partner organizations. So it includes access to like all the functionality through the tool, all the data in the tool, so there's no kind of limitations there. It also includes a kind of a apportionment of what we call custom data loading. So if there is like data that is maybe local to the work that you guys are doing, where we could kind of assist in terms of like loading it in, making it available to the users on your subscription, then that's something that we can also do. And then there's also a interactive widget map, which is something that you could like embed on your website, which could have like a sort of a data menu with a few PolicyMap data layers that you could kind of turn on, and it could have like the Sweet Auburn area kind of target area on the map too. So that's also something I know that Rochelle had mentioned. There's like interest in incorporating some of the PolicyMap's tools onto your website. So I could show some examples of that. after we go through the training, and just point out other ways in which you can sort of incorporate some things on your website. Um, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. And let me just pull up PolicyMap. Okay, so everybody should be seeing PolicyMap now. So the couple of, as I'm kind of getting started with the training, just to mention a couple of table setting things. We, as some of you may know, if you get like some of our emails and stuff like that. So we're sort of in the process of like updating to a new version of the PolicyMap tool. So largely what I'm going to be showing is going to be in sort of the new version. That's kind of what we've kind of set as the default when you log into the tool for at least a few months now. But there may be like some things where I toggle over to the legacy tool. So that's something that you can do is like toggle to the legacy version of the tool for right now as we're kind of finishing up with the transition. But like I said, most of this will be in the new version, but just to kind of mention that at the top. So I'm going to start with basic functionality and navigation, talk about like where you can find data. We're going to kind of at the top of this also sort of show like how you can create a custom region kind of for like your target area or your neighborhood area, focus area, and just so that we kind of have that to sort of frame the rest of the training. So, and then, towards the end, we usually start jumping into some more advanced features of the tool. So, the PolicyMap's a web-based tool, so you can access it from any computer with internet access. So you would just go to policymap.com, that's the URL. And then this is the landing page that you would see. And then I'm already logged in, but you would see, just a big login button where you would put in your username and password. So username is just your email address, and then your password is, you usually get a temporary password the first time when you're originally set up, and then you can, change that after you log in. But there's also like a forgot password link just to reset. So once you log in, you will see kind of this as your default view. So it's going to default to kind of this full view of the United States. So in terms of just like general, navigation, you can pan around on the map. You can use like the scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in and out to different areas of the country to get where you're needing to go. So that's, hopefully all fairly familiar. It's kind of similar to working with like Google Maps or any other web-based mapping tool. Just to point out some support resources. So up in the top right-hand corner, we have a support link that has lots of like guides and tutorials for different features and functions of the tool, using custom regions, generating some standard reports. And then we also have like a video gallery with like short brief videos that you can also use. So just as sort of a resource, after today's training, that's something to point out. We also keep a what's new kind of area down here where we kind of have a running feed of like data that's being updated in the tool. And then if you may see me do this, this is up here in the top, you'll see this link that says go to PolicyMap Legacy. That's where you can toggle kind of back and forth between the two. You'll see links at the top of the page there. So let's do just kind of like some talking about core functionality. One of those pieces of core functionality is this set location bar, where you can search for a specific address or a city or a county, or a zip code to like zoom to that area on the map. So if I were to put in kind of like the zip code area where Sweet Auburn's located, put in 30312, it'll zoom to that area of the map, kind of show you that boundary. And then all the kind of the base map detail starts to fill in as you are zoomed in closer on the map. Let me just go to full screen. So this set location bar also has a drop down, like if you were looking to navigate to a particular census tract or block group or something like that, and you had like an actual ID to use, you can also use the set location bar that way. So I think I pulled one of the census tracts for the Sweet Auburn area. Let's do that. And so similarly, it just kind of will, take you into that area. So we're kind of getting, closer to, your target area of Sweet Auburn. So then one of the things that I would say we sort of typically would talk about later on as sort of like a more advanced feature is creating a custom region. That like allows you to draw your own area on the map or assemble like a couple of census tracts or block group areas. But I think because kind of your group's like particular interest in like the Sweet Auburn target area, I think it would be good just to show that sort of sooner, show how to create one of those and kind of use that again, sort of as like to help with sort of framing this overview of the tool. So to create a new custom region, so I'm just going to remove this census tract boundary. So up in the top right-hand corner, you will see this custom regions button. And so then there's 3 different kind of options for creating a new region. You can either, draw on the map by like connecting the dots, follow like a street network or something like that. You can do a radius, it's kind of a circular radius around a particular address, or you can do an assembled region where you would like assemble a couple of underlying boundaries like block groups or census tracts. So I'll do just kind of for the demonstration purposes, do like an assembled region and use sort of the general, I know this may not kind of follow exactly the Sweet Auburn target area. You may use kind of more of like a street network type of boundary, but I'll use just for the sake of kind of demonstration this assembled region to kind of group together a few block groups that sort of generally capture this area.
Sorry, quick question. Sorry, I have a
Sure.
really quick question. And you can follow up later, but in terms of the source for the census, like I noticed like a lot of times with PolicyMap is based on 2010. Like what's the most recent census data that you all collect? Is it like as the community survey, or the ACS, or do you always stick to the 2010? Or can we toggle that depending on like I guess what you said, like the spatial object we're using?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a little bit deceiving because you see up here like block group 2010. You'll see when we actually get into like the actual census data layers, like on demographics or income and stuff like that, that we use the American Community Survey data, and we always have like the latest 5-year range that's available. This is showing the year of the boundary. So like census boundaries, like tracts and block groups, there's like minor kind of changes that happen annually, but overall, like they tend not to change outside of every 10 years. They really only get like major changes only happen every 10 years. So the next one will be like in 2020 with the 2020 census, like some of those boundaries will actually change. But that's why you see 2010 here. So it's not that it's really just that it's like this, we call it the vintage of the boundary. So it's like the 2010 vintage of or version of block group boundaries, but like all the data in PolicyMap is a lot more current than 2010.
Gotcha. So you use the most recent ACS essentially.
Yeah.
And you can toggle that. Okay. And then the second thing is, if we were to draw these areas that you're showing, sort of like the draw region tool, is PolicyMap able to handle the same level of data for the drawn region as it is for the selected block groups. And I know maybe with the census tract, it might not be able to, given that it's census tract based, but will we still have the same level of what you're about to show us if we were to choose to draw a custom region or use the radius tool?
Yeah, so it's the same. I usually would say, so when you do like a drawn region, the thing just to kind of be aware of is that when you're like drawing an area on the map, like that it may not, since it's following more of like a street network, it may not sort of follow like some of the census delineated boundaries like block groups and census tracts. So what ends up happening is like if you were to draw an area on the map and then would want to like pull some data out of PolicyMap, the way that PolicyMap works is that it will kind of like include data, like it will include those block groups where like more than 50% of the block group area falls within that area that you drew. So that's just sort of it's sort of the general rule that we use in terms of like saying, oh, this block group falls within that custom region. So when you're working with like really small neighborhood areas, sometimes it's kind of best to have like you could have like your drawn actual sort of target area footprint, and then you could have like a version of your target area that is more of like an assembled, that kind of is like follows that as closely as possible, but like assembles the block groups just to kind of make pulling data out of PolicyMap as sort of like clean as possible. Does that make sense? I know this is like super in the weeds.
No, it makes sense. I thank you for answering that. So it just sounds like is using the census data as the bottom layer, and the circle is essentially just going to, like you said, do some function of that. So that lets me know everything I needed to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I've selected these 3 block groups again, which I know are like going to be slightly different than the actual Sweet Auburn target area, but sort of follow it generally. And so if I save this, I need to give it a name. So I could say like Sweet Auburn assembled block group region. And then you can, change transparency on this. There's like sort of some visual things that you can do. And I'm going to go ahead and just save this region, and then I can show you kind of where this goes once it's saved. So once you save it, then if you go back to your custom regions, you'll see a menu over on this second tab that says view my regions. And here's the one like that I just created, and I created kind of the same one yesterday when I was doing just a little bit of prep. But so anytime you need to like access a saved region, you would just go to this view my regions, and then you can select it to reload it on the map. And you can edit these, after you've saved it. So if you wanted to come back and, edit the shape of your region or edit the, color or visual of it, you can do those things as well. But like if you edit the shape, then from here you could like add another block group or remove a block group or whatever. But that is something that you can do after the fact. These are also things that you can share as well. So you'll see when you click on this little icon for the region that you can share this with people. You do have to put in their email addresses. So it's not necessarily going to like automatically share it with all the users on your subscription, but it is something that you can share with others when you create these. It's all come back to kind of some of these other buttons once we have some data to show on the map. But just again, just to sort of like frame, I think, the rest of the walkthrough, I think it's just helpful when you have such like a very specific area that you're working in, just to kind of set that up front, and then we'll kind of like look at some data using this area. So you can zoom in really closely in PolicyMap. So, especially as you're maybe like doing some of the community asset mapping, you may have like, maybe a data set that where you're loading in here that is like a lots of, addresses or like individual points. And so you can really kind of zoom into like the street level. You'll see the, base map details fill in, be able to see like, especially in, you know, uh, being in a big city, you can see, some of the building footprints and things like that. You can also do, just in terms of like creating some different kinds of visualizations, you can use this 3D button in the bottom right-hand corner and sort of like adjust the perspective angle to kind of, show, again, just sort of like customize what sort of bit of visualization you're going to be producing. You can see some of the building heights and kind of really sort of like show your target area kind of relative to kind of like, I guess that's like central Atlanta. And then if you want to go back to your overhead view, just click on this reset button. That'll kind of take you back up to the overhead view. The base maps in PolicyMap, there's sort of a default base map, but you have other options too. So down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's this base map settings where you can change from this standard default one to just like a light kind of gray scaled base map. There's also a terrain base map, and then there's a satellite view too, to actually kind of see like the satellite imagery underneath of any kind of data and your target area. And then with each of these base maps, you also have the ability to toggle on and off different sort of features of the base map. So if you didn't want to have like the buildings, you could uncheck that box, or you didn't want to have the road labels, you can remove them. So there's lots of different customizations you can do from this base map settings to customize your visual. So all of the data in PolicyMap, which we've started to talk about a little bit, is going to be organized into these data menus across the top of the page, from demographics all the way over to analytics. So this is like all the data that that's sort of just available as part of the PolicyMap data library that we're, maintaining on an ongoing basis as sort of those updates get released by the various data sources. So they're grouped by theme in these menus. So you'll see, just to kind of make it easy to sort of find what you're looking for, rather than kind of having them sort of separated out by data source in the menus. So as you open up these menus, you'll see the different indicator kind of groupings, and these will cascade out into kind of more specific indicators that you can select to actually, display a layer on the map. So if I go through like the demographics menu and then look at age, you'll see, you can load on median age, or there's like the different individual age buckets. If I go through race, ethnicity, and diversity, can go through, these kind of branch out into more and more specific indicators. And then once you select one of these, it will actually display that on the map once you've selected it from the menu. So just to kind of like do the quick run through of, the data that's available, demographics is going to have lots of data from the census, population indicators, household types, family types. Incomes and spending is going to have like poverty, low and moderate income. The housing menu is going to have a couple of point data sets, so actual kind of like, address level data of things like public housing, subsidized housing locations. And then there is, median home values, some data on residential and business vacancy, which is one of those data sets that we license, median rents, just sort of like housing tenure, how many homeowners, how many renters. So there's probably lots of good indicators in here that may be of interest. Also, kind of like some cost burden data. So, where there's concentrations of people spending a lot of their money on, their rent or kind of their ownership costs, as well as some homeowner and renter affordability calculations by kind of like area median income thresholds. So some interesting ones to explore. This lending menu has, sorry, was there a question?
Sorry, it looks like you were about to get into it. I was gonna ask about do you have any like financial data or like things you would get from maybe like an Experian, or like a public survey, things of that nature. Because I know sometimes sites license that. I was just curious about that. But it looks like you're getting to it, so I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. Yeah, we don't have any data from Experian. I know that we've occasionally heard of like interest in like credit score data. I know that's something that we've kind of looked into. This lending data that we do have does have data on like mortgage originations, and then like kind of more specific indicators within there, different types of mortgages, mortgages by race, ethnicity, loan denials. Um,
Well, definitely not another thing with credit, just like consumer. And I know you have some income stuff, so but I think I'll just listen to it as you continue,
okay.
and I'll follow up if I have a more specific question.
Yeah, we do have, I didn't mention this one. We do have like some consumer spending habits
Okay.
data. So that would be one to potentially look at some select indicators in there. The mortgage data, I'll talk about some of these other sort of place-based programs in a second. Quality of life has, like transportation, travel time to work, mode of transportation, computer, internet access, access to smartphones, things like that. The economy menu has like jobs data, so like workforce characteristics for residents that live like in your target area. Um, Education is going to have some like school locations and school performance kind of data, locations of universities, libraries, and then there's educational attainment type of indicators. Health has some health facility locations like hospitals and community health centers. There's also food access locations like grocery stores and SNAP retail. And then there's like some small area health estimates on things like chronic conditions, asthma, diabetes, COPD, different risk factors, lead exposure, health insurance access. And then the federal guidelines is going to have some of those indicators on things like NMTC eligibility. We have CRA eligibility, CDBG eligibility type of data in here as well. So those are, maybe things that you might be interested in too. So that's kind of the quick overview of sort of all that's in here. You can also we have this data search bar. So if you wanted to look for search by keyword to look for a particular indicator, like maybe you want to look at income, per capita income, median family income. You can see, as you put in that keyword, sort of some of the results that show up, and then you can select one of these to load that indicator on the map. So I'll go ahead and load just an income indicator. So look at household income bracket and say households with annual income less than $50,000, just to show this an example of like a data layer on the map. And then kind of talk through some of the different things that you'll see when you have data layers on the map. So the data layer is going to be something that is going to shade areas, in this case shading these block groups based on the concentration of this indicator. So like the darker purple areas being where there's a higher concentration of households with income less than $50,000, the lighter areas where there's like a lower percentage. So anytime you have a data layer on the map, you'll see a title over here in the legend for what you're looking at. You'll see the source link. So you can click on this link to get to our kind of directory to see some of the documentation on the data source. You can also click on this information bubble. Sometimes these kind of have sort of more detailed descriptions to them, especially when it involves some sort of calculation. And then in terms of just sort of like let me actually show just in terms of clicking on this data directory source. So if I click on this, this will take you to the directory entry for the census data. So, showing you, what years are available in the data, what, geographies, last time it was updated on PolicyMap, and then sort of like descriptions about sort of anything related to like how we process this data. So there's lots of documentation for like each of these sources that you see in PolicyMap, and that's going to be the case. Like that kind of documentation and those links to data directories will be there for data layers as well as for any data point that you might be looking at. So on the map, I'm just sort of hovering around within this, the Sweet Auburn area. And so, it's just these 3 block group areas, but as I'm, moving my mouse around, you'll see that there's this little info bubble that shows you the estimated percent for each of the block groups. So I'm not actually clicking on anything. So there is that hoverability, and then over in the legend, you'll see it kind of highlights which range you're in based off of where your mouse is hovered. And then you can like click on these ranges if you just wanted to keep those areas that are like have the highest percent of households with income less than $50,000. In this case, there's kind of, one block group within the target area, several block groups kind of just sort of southwest of the target area. And then if you wanted to remove that, you can click on the X in the legend. It brings everything back on. And then if we were to select one of these block group areas, so I'll click on like this area on the kind of the eastern half, I guess, of the target area. And so this opens up kind of this more detailed summary that will show you, the value for that indicator for the block group area, and then it will also show you some of the benchmark areas, so like the zip code area, the city, county, state, so you can see how the small area compares to larger areas. These change over time. Trend charts are interactive, so you can kind of get a quick glance at how that indicator has changed over time. And then these are things that you can expand out into a full chart so that you can, it'll keep just sort of your selected area on the map, and you can just look at, how, in this case, households with income less than $50,000 has changed for these, 4 time frames. And then you could put on like, the city of Atlanta as a benchmark, and then other ones as well to create, sort of build out your trend chart. So, obviously this eastern kind of half of the target area has seen a pretty drastic sort of decline in terms of, these households with less than $50,000 in income. And so then this trend chart is something that up here in the top right-hand corner, you'll see this a little menu icon where you can download this. You could download like this as an image, drop it into a presentation or something like that really quickly. And then you could also just download an Excel of just basically the summary data that populates this.
Can this be embedded? Like if we were to embed, for example, the map, can the trend chart also be embedded with this in a website or web page?
I gotta check on the whether the trend chart comes through. So you can embed a map for sure. So, if you create your map, you have your data layer on over here in the bottom right hand corner, there's a little share icon. I have to remove this custom region in this case, but if you click on this embed, this like will give you just like a quick iframe to embed the map on your website. But I have to check on whether the trend chart flows through to that embedded map. It may just be kind of like a more simple info bubble.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure there are workarounds with the image itself, putting it there. I was just wondering if it. Yeah. Thank you.
Let me just drop this back on. So just to show sort of interactivity over here in the legend, like a couple of other options that are available if you wanted to keep the same indicator, but sort of show it for a previous time frame. You can select a different time frame from this drop down. So you could go back to like 2005, 2009 to show the same indicator on the map, but just for a previous year. You can also change your variable from the estimated percent to something like a count of households with income less than $50,000, or select like a percent change indicator just to show how this indicator has changed. You could kind of like, rather than using the trend chart, you could also just show like on the map, this orange area is sort of where there's been a pretty big decline in terms of households with income less than $50,000. So percent change is also available on a lot of indicators. And then you can also do, visual stuff, change your colors for your color ramp, and then you can also use change your cut points. And maybe you want like your top range to just be where this is greater than 70%, something like that. You can drag these sliders and everything just changes dynamically over on the map based off of the different changes that you make to these range groupings. And then you can also, you guys are going to be working in like a really small area, so block group data, census tract data is probably what you want anyways, but you do have the ability to like shade these at different boundaries from this shaded by dropdown, and then like lock to a boundary. So maybe you always want it to be like locked to the block group, and then it won't like change based off of your zoom. So I'll just load some points just to show you a little bit about interacting with them. So I'll put on like low-income housing tax credit locations. Let me go back to purple here. So this, the low-income housing tax credit locations is going to be, a point data set where you're actually seeing the point locations of these project locations. And so when you're hovering over them, you can see, just like a quick title of like the project name. If you click on one of them, then this more detailed bubble shows up where you can look at the attributes for the point data. In the case of like LIHTC, project details on like how many units, how many of them are low income units, those kinds of things. And this will all obviously depend on the different data source that you're looking at. You'll see the source link up here, and then you can also change your icons to use like something that works as a better visual depending on sort of what you're trying to display. And then oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You can answer this later. Is there a possibility to add any, like your own points into the map, and then with those points, perhaps add hover information? Like if you were to make your own custom map, put some key points, zoom it in, and so other folks can hover over it and see, points of interest. Is that possible here?
Yeah, so that's you can load your own address level data through a data loader tool that's available. So yeah, so I'll show that. That'll be kind of, I think, the first thing that I show for in kind of the more advanced functionality, because I know that that's something you guys are wanting to do, some like community asset mapping.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And then if I go back now, so I have some data on the map, and so if you ever want to remove data, you can click on like the X's. So if I wanted to remove these LIHTC points or the data layer, you can click on these to remove them. You can also use this reset map in the bottom right hand corner, which just kind of like refreshes your page. But if I click back now on this Sweet Auburn area custom region, just to show you, some of these other buttons, I gotta kind of minimize some things here so it's not as busy. But if I use in terms of like maybe like creating a map visual that better, that just kind of like just shows those areas within, your custom region or your target area that you created. you can use this clip tool with that custom region to kind of clip all the data outside of it so that like, you're just presenting, like a map of just, in this case, those few block groups that are within your target area. So you can use the clip boundary there. That is also here down in the bottom right-hand corner if you wanted to like remove it or toggle that on and off. That's something you can do. And then these see table, see list of points. These are things that, again, like so using your target area as sort of the bounding area or as sort of like the, your study area, you can use these buttons to pull up, a quick list of, for this indicator, households with income less than $50,000, what are the 3 block groups? What are the values for each of them? You can download that. And then similarly, if I toggle here, I can go over to the list of points and see like the 3 LIHTC properties that are located in here and download that list of points into Excel. You can also expand this out and see like a full table of them. So those are, some of those things that you can do using some of these buttons down here. The other one is we do have a few just sort of like standard reports that you can generate. And these can be helpful, especially, if you have like a custom region or like a target area that you work in. A quick way to, just get like a lot of summary level information for that area is to use one of these standard reports. So if you click on this Get Reports button, there's a few standard ones. This community profile one's probably the most sort of heavily used. And if I generate this, this one's going to have just sort of like lots of, demographic info, income, ranges, household types, and things like that. So that, again, like kind of a quick way to get, information like maybe like for grant applications or something like that. And it's always just going to have sort of the latest data that's available in the PolicyMap platform. So if you scroll down through, it shows your area. You'll see population estimates, how that's changed over time, this being sort of your target area, and then using a couple of benchmarks like the county and the state, the breakdown of race and ethnicity, age distribution. Here's like the income brackets for Sweet Auburn, looking at that relative to the county, the state. So yeah, we've just heard that that's sort of a good resource, especially for like groups that are doing, like community-based work that like a lot of times they might be, needing this type of data quickly to like complete some grant applications. So wanted to mention that.
While you're here, I'm sorry, I'm a person asking a bunch of questions. Is there opportunity for us to, if we were to have our own custom map, make some shape, form, or fashion of this for folks? So I know like this is generated by PolicyMap report, but is there anything that we can do or they like if we have a report that we would want to be attached to like an embed in a website? Is that possible? Or
We do some of that. It's usually like it's usually kind of like an add-on to the premium subscription. So it's not something that there's sort of like something available out of the box in terms of like reporting capabilities on like a public facing tool.
Okay.
So let me just show how you can also export some images. So if I like, again, maybe click to the Sweet Auburn area, and then I want to, like export this map. If you use this print icon over on the right-hand side, this will allow you to export like a PDF or an image of your map. So you can, pan around in here to kind of like center your map on the area, you can, there's lots of different options that you can kind of toggle around on here. So you can change, the name of the export, the orientation, again, PDF or PNG, whether you want to include different legends. You can also like edit some of these descriptions, just kind of like edit the text on the fly and save that. So once you've kind of set everything up, then you can export this. And it just pops up through your browser after a few minutes. And then, that's something that you can just sort of easily use outside of the PolicyMap. That's sort of like a static map. And then we, quickly showed the embedded map capability as well. So any other questions at this point before I start kind of jumping into more like the data loader and a couple of other maybe advanced functionality?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Sorry, it might be because I'm standing next to it. Okay. Oh, cool. So I know typically, like if you're using other software and you have like a bunch of data, but you want to use it with other mapping software like ArcMap or something like that, does it have that capability to use the same data in here and just like export it as like shape files and everything? Like, can that be done?
So we don't have shapefile exports yet, but what we do have when you download data, let me just pull up like a sample. So you'll see when you download like a layer data set out of PolicyMap that we include the like the FIPS codes, if you're familiar, so that you can easily like join them to like a general sort of like census tiger file in ArcMap. So we're hoping to be able to, we are eventually planning on adding the ability to actually export shape files, but for right now, we include, I'm just trying to pull up a like a sample export just so you can kind of see it. We do include like the FIPS information so that you can work with it in ArcMap too.
For joins, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so here's just sort of like a sample. You'll see the FIPS code, couple of different sort of formatted versions of that just to kind of like make it easiest to produce your join. And then here's like the, the value for the, in this case is like a census tracts.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions before I jump into the data loader?
This might be similar to the previous question, but have you seen this PolicyMap and Tableau complement one another in any use cases, or are there any typical, or is there like a lot of overlap between the two?
I couldn't hear the beginning of the question. What was it? The overlap between the two? So PolicyMap and what was the other?
Tableau. I mean,
okay.
I understand you all have embedding and all of that, but I think Tableau might have, they really focus on the interactive part of it. So I'm wondering, are people using both, or how have you seen people using both together?
Yeah, I think that what we've like mostly heard is that people are using data from PolicyMap in their like Tableau dashboards. That sort of seems to be the most common thing that we've heard. So they, might, if they have like a really specific sort of like data visualization that they're trying to do, and like the kind of like easily sort of assembled sort of things that you can do in PolicyMap aren't exactly like fitting the bill, that they will like just sort of like grab maybe some of the data. The data is all like standardized and easy to sort of work with outside of PolicyMap, that they would then sort of use the data that they pull and incorporate it like into their Tableau dashboard. So that's probably the most common thing we've heard.
Got you. And in that, in some of those cases, because you don't have shapefile export, they would have already pulled in the shapefile from somewhere else, and then, okay.
So then let me go to, so I'll jump into the data loader since I know that that's something you guys are interested in doing, is having, community asset maps and being able to eventually load your own data. So this is one of those things that I'm going to show in the legacy version of the tool, the data loaders in the legacy version of PolicyMap for right now. So let me jump over to legacy. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to open up this sort of sample data set. So this is just like a really simple list of addresses, and I didn't have sort of just like addresses within Sweet Auburn. So this is just sort of like some addresses in Atlanta. But in terms of loading data through the self-service data loader in PolicyMap, pretty much the fields that you have to have are the street address, city, state, and zip code. You can have other fields in your data. So you can have, I think it's like up to 50 fields. You can have, I think it's up to like 5,000 records in a batch that you can load through the self-service data loader. You can do like unlimited numbers of batches, but just sort of like per upload, you have to break it up into 5,000 addresses. And so you can have additional fields and things like that. But in terms of, like the key details that need to be in there for the sort of the geocoder to be able to place the points on the map, it's the street address, city, state, and zip code. So this is just like a really, again, simple sort of somewhat dummy data set here. And so I have this saved just locally as a CSV, which you can do, in Excel. And so the data loader is up here. So in this legacy tool, up at the top of the screen, you'll see a data loader tab. And so there is the ability to like add individual points still in this legacy data loader, but most people use just like a spreadsheet that they already have assembled. And I'll say like Sweet Auburn community assets. You can set different permissions. You can have this like available to certain individuals. The publicly shareable option is if you would want this data that you're loading through the data loader to also be available in like an embedded map, then you would do the publicly shareable. You can change your icon shape, size, color, and then here's where you would go and just find your file. Okay, so there's that sample data set. There are like some links here for like tips for setting up your spreadsheet if that is helpful. So then the next kind of step within this wizard is that it's gonna, based off of the field names, try and locate the address fields. Usually it's, unless your like street address is labeled something abnormal or unusual, it's usually going to be able to find like the address and then your city, state, and zip code. And then it'll identify your other fields in your data set. So on this next step, it's going to do the geocoding, build out this summary table. So all these, records with these green dots, it's saying, it's already geocoded. These ones it found a point location for that address. But you can sort this to see any non-matches. So if you click on that column, you'll see the red dots are the ones that there wasn't a match for. You'll see the summary at the top saying like how many points were successfully geocoded. And then you can do edits here on the fly. So if you,
Awesome.
so like, let's say you realize like there was a bad, something messed up with the street address, you change that, you can, then it has, found a match after I made that edit. And then in here, like this is Northwest. and it's, resolves those on the fly. So then once you've gone through, made any kind of like manual adjustments on any like non-geocoded records, then from here you could just download these if you just want to use this for geocoding purposes. You could also save it and kind of use it in PolicyMap, obviously. So if I save and close this, here's just a quick preview of those points. Again, sort of points all across Atlanta. I'm going to jump back into the new version of PolicyMap and show you where these points are accessible. So those types of data sets that you load through that data loader are going to be here in the My Data tab. And so here is like that Sweet Auburn community assets point data that I just loaded. And so if I select this from that My Data menu, I'm gonna have to kind of zoom out to see the full picture. I'll see those points on the map here. And then, there's not, if I click on these, there weren't that many attributes in my data set, but, there is sort of, the hoverability, the ability to, click and see the actual individual attributes. And then, you can also, download this data. Again, like maybe you want to see which, property locations or something like that. You may have a list of addresses and see which ones are within Sweet Auburn. You could, load that data through the data loader and then use your, custom region to see, which points fall within the Sweet Auburn area. So we don't have a ton within this point data set, but if you just click on this list and see a list of points, in this case, just this one point location, but obviously if you had a lot more, they would display. So that's kind of loading it through the data loader. And then, like I said, if you had, when you do set it up as publicly shareable, then you can, include, that data set that you uploaded into your embedded map too.
This is awesome. I have a quick question.
Sure.
But it can wait until you finish. But it's about the screen you were in before this one, where it was showing the options on the upload.
Yeah, let me go back to that. And the I go back to this data loader page. So if you need to make edits after the fact to that data that you loaded, back on the data loader page, you'll see a tab that's like edit my data sets, and here's like that one. I can click on this pencil icon, edit permissions, add additional data points, change like the icon, that kind of stuff. But yeah, what was your question?
What are the options? Yeah, the icons. Are there various like different types to make them? Okay, those are the options. Okay.
Yeah, and then you do have, so you can change that here on this page for the the data on the data loader page, like change your options in terms of your icon size, shape, and color. When you're actually looking at in the new platform, when you're actually looking at that data on the map, you also should, I believe, have the ability to change that just sort of like when you're actually viewing the data. So just wait for it to load here. So yeah, you can change this to, here's the same points. And if you wanted to, use something different, even from like kind of what you selected initially, you can do that on the map too. So you can kind of toggle to different options for those points.
And is there like a map legend that's editable? I see like on the point section, we can edit that. I guess like let's just say I had multiple icons in one custom map. Can I edit the icon? Sort of like a legend so that the viewer can see, hey, here are the healthcare locations. Here's housing. Like, is that possible with what you're showing?
Yeah, usually for something like that, you would do, the best way to do it is just to like break them up, so that you have sort of like a separate point layer for your maybe like neighborhood assets versus like health resources or something like that. Because in PolicyMap's data, ordinarily, something like that we would do, even if I like load on one of our point data sets, like the LIHTC
Yeah.
properties, we have, through the filters, we have the ability to do like color coded filters with a legend. So you could see, red dots are those LIHTC properties with 5 or fewer units, the blue ones being the larger properties. But that ability is just in like PolicyMap's point data. It's not available on the data loader data, like the ability to set up your own filters and things like that. You just will see like it's kind of grayed out here. So, so right
So just
now,
adding
if you
different layers.
wanted, yeah, right now, if you wanted to have that kind of different symbology for the different point layers, it's just like you just kind of break them up into different point layers when you load them.
And what's the max layer amount? Like I would say, like in any given, is there like a maximum?
The only real limitation is the number of records per batch, that 5,000 records per batch, but there's no limit in terms of how many like point uploads you can do, or how many you can have on the map at the same time.
Okay, and so just so I'm mirroring back to, and I think two of the interns joined the call. Basically, if we upload the spreadsheet with the data, that's the layers, and with that we can customize what goes into it, including descriptors that when they hover over it, it pops up. But if we want to have different, sort of like a legend going on, we just have to have different layers on the map, which would mean different data uploads,
Mhm.
and then go from there.
Right.
Okay. And so the legend itself, essentially, we were trying to do a legend. We might have to name the title of that layer something that's recognizable,
Mhm.
similar to that of a legend. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's where, yeah, over on the data loader page, when you like set the name, that name is basically what shows up
Mhm.
here.
Thank you for bearing with me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody have any other questions? Just check the see if there was anything in this chat.